A Hidden Life, which is the new film by Terrence Malick. I have to say this. So firstly, it's a partial return to form for Terrence Malick. Malick has proved quite challenging in his recent releases. Prince of Carp Song to Song, which I thought were just a terrible film. I mean, genuinely terrible. And I became quite exasperated by how because people who love Terrence Malick, cineasts will often stand by because what they're thinking of is they're thinking of Badlands and they're thinking of the extraordinary. I mean, actually everything I think up until Thin Red Line. So I did lose patience with Malick, and this kind of got me back on board to some extent. It is the true story of Austrian conscientious objector Franz Jägerstätter, who refused to swear allegiance to Hitler during the Second World War. Interesting as well that this now finds itself in cinemas around the same time as Jojo Rabbit, which again is dealing with that subject, but in a very, very different way. The film begins with Franz and his wife living an idyllic life away from conflict, tilling the land, laughing, loving, starting a family. This is very much latter-day Malick, handheld camera, beautifully composed, fluid images of people behaving in a sort of natural glow of nature, but clouds are gathering, and this being a Terrence Malick film, there are literal clouds gathering. You know that thing, is it called the pathetic fallacy, which is when the weather, is it called that? It's right, isn't it?
It rings a bell.
Pathetic fallacy means somebody is really sad and rainy and it starts raining, okay? So this is the kind of, storm clouds are gathering, and look, there are big storm clouds that are gathering, which is one of the moments in which it felt rather too on the nose. So along with the shots of the trees and the grass and glorious, abundant mountains swathed in mist, as with Malick's cinema particularly recently, there's an extensive use of voiceover, which is facilitated also by letters written between the two main characters, signature roaming cameras with voices of wonderment as terrible things start to replace a lost idyll. Here's a clip.
Remember the day when we first met?
You were shy like now.
I remember that motorcycle. My best dress. You looked at me, and I knew. How simple life was then. It seemed no trouble could reach our valley. We lived above the clouds.
So you get a sense from that, I think even from just hearing that, you'd know that you were it's a Terrence Malick film. It's beautifully shot by Jörg Widmer, who'd worked before as a camera operator with Malick since New World. Scored by James Newton Howard. And there is a very powerful story in here, which is a story about defiance, about somebody's quiet defiance, but also about the way in which religious institutions in the shape of the church basically fall in line with something which is wicked and evil, in which the figure of Hitler is referred to as the Antichrist, and yet is somehow facilitated by the machinations of the religious authorities. The film was originally titled Radigund, which is the place where Franz comes from, and then the new title comes from George Eliot. The Eliot quote is, "For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who've lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs." So the film is sort of like a celebration of, in much the same way, this hadn't occurred to me until just now, it's the kind of it's a wonderful life thing, the celebration of decency in the face of appalling evil. And one of the things that he keeps being asked is, do you think this will make any difference? Do you think this will make, why are you doing this? Because the village and the town then turn on the family for standing up, for having a principle, for not falling in line. So you could see it, and I know some commentators have, as a commentary on what's happening at the moment with the evangelical right in America. And, there's been this big schism in the church recently when Christianity Today wrote an editorial about, we cannot support Trump because this is actually fundamentally differing from our own views of morality. And this has become a very sort of hot topic. The thing you need to remember is that this was shot. The shooting began in 2016. So it kind of, like we were saying in the case of Bombshell, you presume that because something happens in the middle of a current news story, that it wasn't. But actually, this predates that. And of course, if you know Malick's movies, they usually don't address single contemporary issues. He's much more in the market of addressing, existential and quasi-religious, much more sort of broader themes. I have to say, one of the things I found problematic was that the music played up the religious, spiritual element in a way, and believe me, I'm a sucker for that, right? I mean, I'm an absolute sucker for it. Two popes, two guys sitting around talking about ontological existence of God. Yeah, fine, yeah, bring it on, absolutely happy. But even I felt a little bit like, Mr. Malick, this scene would be better if you just turned the soundtrack off and just allowed it to play out. I did find some of that obtrusive. I also found some of it a little bit like some of Malick's worst work has started to look like an existential perfume advert. And although this never has that, it does have a sense at times of the indulgence that I think unhinged some of his more recent films. But it is the best thing he's done in a long time. And it is very, very Terrence Malick for all the good and bad that means.